Okay, I'm back for part two, and we'll actually talk about the album because I went on for half an hour talking about how the album came to be. I do tend to ramble. So, anyway, what's this album all about? Well, 1968, and again, the Kinks are totally out of sync with the time. The Rolling Stones are Beggar's Banquet, Street Fighting Man, and the Beatles are singing about revolution and Revolution Number 9 and White Albums and assassination of King and Kennedy is going on, and the Democratic Convention in 1968 in Chicago, and campuses being shut down by anti-war protests, and civil rights struggle still going on, and the hippies in San Francisco, and freak out jams in the Velvet Underground singing about S&M and scoring drugs on the streets of New York, and this the Kinks again singing about the joys of looking at old photographs and china cups and antique shops and being members of the Skyscraper Condemnation affiliate and the old times, and totally out of sync. But this album actually holds up a lot better now than much of the stuff that was fashionable back in those days in 1968, oddly enough. So, this is supposed to be an album. Otis is laying on my notes. Sort of old times, youth, regrets, growing old, being young, memories, what it means to be alive, big question stuff. And it's all this quaint, muted. There's very little what you would call hard rock. There's nothing of the "you really got me" all day and all of the night type is long forgotten. It will return, but for now it's out of the picture. There is some good guitar and some what you could call rock and roll and pop and upbeat music. Every song on here really is pretty upbeat. It's just the lyrics are bittersweet and both joyful and regretful. But we'll get to that in a second. It's a concept album in the grandest scheme and maybe one of the most successful ones, even though you can argue that the Kinks album Arthur that came out the next year might be a little more successful even so on the concept theme of things. Is it a rock opera? No, not really. I wouldn't say. Not in the sense that something like Tommy, which came out the next year, or SF Sorrow, which came out in 1968 by the Pretty Things, or later down the road things like Quadrophenia from The Who from 1973, or The Wall from Pink Floyd from 1979. It doesn't tell a doesn't doesn't tell a narrative linear story the way those albums kind of sort of do. I mean, Tommy has a bit of a story to it. It's a silly ass story. It's a good album. I like Tommy, don't get me wrong, but the story's pretty goofy. Um, this is more building a theme around a village green in a uh, probably make believe or an everyman, every person British village town. Village green being in like the park in the center of the town where people used to meet and hang out back in the old days before TV and internets and so forth and so on. So, and the people in that town. So it's mainly just a look at the people in that town and the town more than it's telling a story, a rock opera. It's just a look at the town and the thoughts and the hopes and the dreams of the people in the town, all tied together by this theme of sort of nostalgia and looking back. And it's kind of like Ray is singing at times as the voice of a young person, and then at other times he's singing as the voice of maybe that same person 40, 50 years later as an adult looking back on being young, and vice versa. So the songs, you got the Village Green Preservation Society, which was actually written later in the process of him writing these songs between 66 and 68, opens it very low-key, muted, wonderful, beautiful song. And there's one thing this is said, like I said, this didn't chart at all anywhere, and read where there's no hit singles on this. Well, there aren't technically, but there should have been, because there's several songs on here that in a better world would have topped the charts. Uh, this is just so. Village Green Preservation Society is a great opener. It's kind of a light but bouncy, very evocative and effective song. It's. I would love to play some of this, but it got blocked when I played some stuff from the face-to-face review, so I don't want to get in danger of doing that. But the Village Green Preservation Society opens things on a wonderful note, and it's one of those. And this is one of those albums, like I said, when I first heard it, it's just one of those like Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or like when I first heard the Beatles stuff when I was, I was very young then, but or Sound Effects by the Jam. It's just its own a complete vision that just sort of stands alone, apart from anything else, and just so strange and different, and just I don't really know how to describe it any better than that. But so Village Green Preservation Society is a great opening, a wonderful song. Second song, Do You Remember Walter, is you've when you run into one of your friends from back in being a kid or high school, teenage days that you haven't seen. I don't know, people on here that are 20 years old, but I mean, people like me that are older, that you haven't seen in 10, 20, 30 years, and it's nice to see them. It's wonderful to see them, but once you run through the, hey, what have you been doing? What do you do now? Have you seen so-and-so? Then a lot of times, most of the time, unfortunately, you kind of find out that you really don't have much to talk about anymore, that you're not the same people you were then, and you don't have too much in common. So it's not, unfortunately, you don't hook up and start hanging out again and being friends like you were there. You just sort of, hey, it's good to see you again. We'll have to get together sometime, and you never really do. And so this is that, Walter being, um, a friend. Back when they were young, they were going to inseparable and rule the world and make a difference and have all these plans, and then they lose track of each other, and now Walter's, fat and boring and home in bed by 10:30, and Ray comes around wanting to talk about the old days, and Walter gets bored and has nothing more to say. And the kicker being the last line saying that people change, but memories of people can remain. So even though it's sad that, you run into old friends and you don't have anything in common anymore, at least you have your memories of the old days. But that's also kind of bittersweet, because that's great, but it's not as good as the actual when you were friends and running around and had stuff in common and all that. But a great bouncy song. Picture Book, number 3 song, is the joys of looking at old photographs. And photographs come up a couple of times on this album, because what evokes memory more than photographs, well, I'm sure there's other stuff, but I mean, that's one of the most, the things that brings old memories back, photographs. So the Village Green is, again, it's the things aren't as good as they used to be type of, let's preserve the, especially, I mean, that's even more relevant now than it was in 1968, when, it's the Apple iPhone, and 6 months later it's the Apple iPhone version 2, and it's the Apple iPhone version 3, and just this disposable society. And maybe it was better when, if that makes sense. So yeah, Johnny Thunder is the first, and this is about the Village Green, and it's about the people inhabiting to live in the Village Green. Johnny Thunder's kind of the nonconformist, the rebel. Song is supposedly modeled on Marlon Brando in The Wild One, but the rebel is the nonconformist, but it's kind of in the end, the nonconformist is just as tied in by the rules of conformity as the kid that grows up and goes to college and becomes an accountant and goes to work with a suit and a tie every day. You know, the nonconformist might be going around in the motorcycle and the ripped up jeans and vest, but he's wearing so, you know, Bittersweet again, good song. Last of the Steam Powered Trains is a little departure in sound because it sounds like an old blues, kind of an old Muddy Waters song, sped up a little bit. And it's kind of funny because Ray's I'm Stuck in the Past, I'm Not Like Everybody Else, which was an earlier song of his. You know, I'm on an Island was another earlier song of his, sort of, I don't really get the world, I'm here and don't seem to fit in, but I'm kind of an anachronism and stuck in the past. Last of the Steam Powered Trains. The fact that they do the song in that sort of Muddy Waters, Smokestack Lightning type um, form is even funny because by 1968, when you think of the British bands like the Rolling Stones, the Yardbirds, the Animals, the Kinks, even the Who early on did all these R&B songs early on. The Beatles not so much. They did more rock and blues songs. I'm saying the Beatles did more R&B and rock covers, but the Rolling Stones, Yardbirds, Kinks, and all that, that was really Eric Clapton, etc. That was the style. That was the in thing in 1963 and 1964. You know, by 1965, that kind of had fallen out of style, and that was kind of the Rolling Stones. It was, you know, you can't just do these R&B songs forever. Their manager told them, because look at the Beatles over there writing their songs and having hits. You guys need to start writing songs and be more pop and less Little Red Rooster and I'm a King Bee, etc., etc. And so here the Kinks in 1968 are doing this old um, blues song thing, which by that point in time is really out of date, which I think they did that purposely to do that, but it's a great song too. Big Sky is one of the most wonderful, beautiful songs on here and should have been #1 for 10 weeks. Big Sky is either Ray Davies looking at the people in the village green as the writer of the album, or it's about God. Uh, Big Sky's too too big to see people like you and me. Big Sky's too occupied, and one day we'll be free. It's a soaring, majestic, very beautiful. One of the last songs he wrote for the album. Another uh, great song, "Sitting by the Riverside," is not really sure how it fits into the concept of this, but it's just the guy, maybe Ray, sitting by the riverside watching the world go by, and I think it's maybe a comment on we all have plans, but then time goes by and then you realize that it's 5, 10 years later and all these dreams you had, and maybe it's too late now, something like that. It's a good song. It's a great song. Every one of those songs I would rate a 10 so far. Then we get to Animal Farm, another song I'd rate a 10. Kind of like the Orwell book, Animal Farm, people compared to animals, but the world is great and crazy and half insane. It's a good line. Village Green is the first song, supposedly, that Ray wrote for this album, and it just, you know, I love the Village Green, the church and the steeple and the people, and it's sort of looking back fondly but with regret that things aren't the way they used to be, and the kicker being that they can't be. Even if you did go back, it's not the same, and it's kind of like in there. Do you remember Walter? That even if you hook up with these people again that you used to be friends with when you were a kid, it's not going to be the same, and that's just life, unfortunately. Starstruck is a pretty good song. It's one of the weaker songs on the album, but I like it. It's a good song on an album full of perfect songs. Uh, it's I think it's about actually it's about the Kinks having been, they grew up in London, but in a small village. I don't really know England, but I mean, they didn't grow up in downtown London. They grew up in a small, I think, kind of village area off suburb, I guess, is what I'm looking for. And they went off and became famous. And, you know, when you're young and you want to be famous, in their case, and then you get fame and you get more than you bargained for, and you kind of realize that the simple pleasures of home and what you had before might be preferable to what fame brings. The next song is just the first time I heard this, it's just one of those you scratch your head and you're like, what in the hell is this? It's called Phenomenal Cat, and it's like Bike on the final song on Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd. It's just so goofy and weird and different and out there, and but just wonderful and a great song. But when you first hear it, you're like, and Phenomenal Cat is like that. It's a children's song in a way. It's kind of a psychedelic song, which the Kinks never really got psychedelic, with very, very few exceptions. There were a couple of songs on something else. There's a couple of songs on here. Phenomenal Cat could be considered psychedelic in some respect. Kind of something that Syd Barrett might have written, actually. But it's a cat who can fly and who also sings, which most cats don't do either. But the cat travels around the world and learns the secret of life and comes home in his tree and eats himself to contentment and eternity. And it's a very odd sounding, strange song, and I love it, and it's a 10, and it should have been a #1 hit, even though it's probably too odd to have been a hit song. But it's and there's of course reference to the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, and Ray sings most of the song, but Dave sings the part of the cat singing, and it's this very odd vocal because they speed. He's not really singing words. He's just dum dum diddly dum, and but it's sped up, and then the tapes drag, so it's got this really odd sound, and it's an incredible song, and I love Phenomenal Cat. All of my friends were there. As actually, I don't want to go into the story because it's too long, but Ray Davies, being that Kinks did a concert and a bunch of his friends showed up, and he was drunk and did a bad show and yada yada yada. But exactly how it fits into the concept of this album, I've never really figured out. It's a pretty good song. Next song is an incredible one too, Wicked Annabella, which is about as close to freak out psychedelia as the Kinks ever got, and it's incredible. And it's the hardest rocking song on the album. And all these songs are really good melody and strong singing and upbeat. Like I said, the music's upbeat, the lyrics are bittersweet, but other times they're celebratory of life too. So it's not a downer. It's a great, wonderful album, even though there is sadness and regret seeping through it. But yeah, Wicked Annabella is she's a witch, apparently, but she's the lady in town, the crazy person in town that you grew up, or the scary, the kids are saying that house is haunted, or the person that lives there is a little flaky, or the hermit, or she's the oddball in town. Really cool song. Dave sings it, even though Ray wrote the song. Monica is a kind of a calypso beat song. Monica is the town's sporting girl, the good time girl available at hourly rates, if you know what I'm saying. Probably the weakest song on the album, but not a bad song. It's a good one. It's just okay. The album ends with People Take Pictures of Each Other, which is a really great ending, really upbeat song. Of course, we had Picture Book was the second song, which I forgot to mention is love the ending of that. You get a Ray does a little scat singing at the ending of the song, which is an upbeat song all the way through it, and there's a little tribute to Frank Sinatra. He does a couple of Scooby Dooby Doos, so it's really cool. Picture Book is just kind of the joys of looking at photographs and the memories they evoke. People Take Pictures of Each Other is that same theme, but a little darker turn. It's people take pictures of each other just to prove that they really existed, just in case someone thought they had missed it. And there's a line in there a couple of times where he says, pictures of me as I used to be, and then he says, don't show me no more, please. And you can look at that as somebody showing you pictures of their when they were young, or their family, or their people when they had the babies. Here's the baby pictures, and you're like, okay, that's really cool. That's really all right. Don't show me anymore. I've had enough, or don't show me no more, please. What I think he's saying is that those were pictures of good times, and these aren't good times. That was a long time ago, and looking at those is kind of depressing because it brings up the fact that things were better then, or at least they were perceived to be better, because the past is usually always perceived to be better, whether it actually was or not, and you can't go back. And so you don't want to look at pictures of your kids when they were young, or your grandparents who are no longer alive, or your old girlfriend that's married to someone else now, even though you do, because sometimes you can't help it, but it always has that, sadness with it. So that ends the album proper. This one, like I said, I don't have the vinyl anymore. This was, there's a little booklet. This was re-released on CD, I don't know, several years ago. It's a triple CD. You get the mono, the stereo. The mono sounds better in my opinion, and you get a third disc of rarities. So in the first part of this video, in this review, I was talking about the whole long convoluted story of how Village Green album came to be, and it is, Ray wrote tons of songs, ended up being a 15-song album, so where did all those other songs go? Well, some of them ended up on flip sides of singles, some of them ended up on even as late as the Lola album, which came out in 1970. Some of them have been bootlegs, some of them have never been released to this day, and sitting in Ray Davies' closet, I guess. Maybe been erased, who knows. So there's still unreleased stuff. In 1973, Reprise of Pie, and I think this came out in America, so I think it was Reprise, put out an album called The Great Lost Kinks album, which had quite a few of the songs that were written around this time. Some of them were considered for the Village Green, some of them never were considered for the Village Green album, but they were just written around the same time. Anyway, the Great Lost Kinks album came out in 1973. Ray had a fit and got it withdrawn, so it was not out in the shops for very long, and if you can find it now, it goes for a pretty penny. I don't know, you can buy them for 50 to $100 or so, but that had a lot of those songs. This album has, with the 3 CD set, you've got the stereo, the mono, and the rarities, but the stereo and the mono both have extras, so you have some of these extra songs that were never released, and some of them, like I said, were considered to be on Village Green at one point or another. Some of them never were, and some of them are just singles that came out around the time. So you got a song, Mr. Songbird, which was at some point considered to be on Village Green. It was on the 12-track album, which never came out, but which actually did come out. Like I said, that's all confusing again and again. So Mr. Songbird is a odd song, but a good song. It's a weird song. It sounds kind of like a Simon and Garfunkel song, only better, but kind of strange, and I've never really made up my mind whether I like it or not. You get Polly, which is a really cool song, which wouldn't have fit on the, well, yeah, this might have fit. Polly might have fit on the album. Polly to me sounds like The Who. It sounds a lot, doesn't sound note for note, but it sounds in spirit like The Who, Happy Jack, that Who song a little bit, but it's really good. You get Wonder Boy, the song that, single that flopped, which is actually not a bad song, and you get Berkeley Muse, which is a really good song, which ended up 2 years later on the flip side of the Lola 45. Got a really great driving bass and guitar. And on the rarities, I'm not going to go through everything, but you get some instrumentals that are good. You get some of the songs that Ray wrote for the TV shows. You get a strange thing called Mick Avery's Underpants, Mick Avery being the drummer of the band, which is an instrumental, which is really cool. You get Where Did My Spring Go, which showed up on the Great Lost Kinks album, which was quickly withdrawn and hard to find nowadays because it's out of print, been out of print since, 1973. Great song, wonderful song. King Kong, which is a great song. And there was one that was really cool, and I can't remember. Trying to remember. Oh well. Creeping Gene and Groovy Movies, both really cool songs. So, oh, and when I was talking about the convoluted and complex and confusing way that this album came together, in between that, the fact that they were banned in America from 65 to 69, this came out in 68. Reprise Records wanted to, since American kids had by and large forgotten about the Kinks, they wanted to try to get the Kinks back into the spotlight. So they got Rolling Stone and Crawdaddy to do reviews of this album, which they gave them really positive reviews. Didn't make any difference because nobody bought it and it didn't even chart. But at the same time, Reprise Records did put ads in Rolling Stone and maybe Crawdaddy magazine, I'm not sure, where they put together for $2 you could send off and get a Kinks box set, which was a box, kind of think the wedding album, John Lennon's wedding album, only with good music or real music. Came with an album called Then, Now, and In Between, which was sort of kind of a greatest hits, had things like You Really Got Me, Sunny Afternoon, and had some tracks from this album. And the box also had a button that said God Save the Kinks, and a picture and a poster and a bag of grass, except not that kind of grass, this being the Village Green Preservation Society, the Village Green, the lawn, the park, like fake grass clippings from a guy mowing the grass. So anyway, and it came in a box set with the album Then, Now, and In Between, vinyl of course, because there were no CDs in those days, and cost like $2. And in 1969, I was 6 years old, so I wish I would have had the knowledge and foresight to ask my parents to buy 10 or 12 of those, because that box set, if you can find it now, goes for about $500, and I've never actually seen a real one. And the album will show up by itself every once in a while, and those sell for $100 or more. So there is the Kinks Village Green Preservation Society. Like I said, my second favorite album of all time, and didn't even chart. And it's an album that's just incredible. It's like if the Beatles, when they stopped touring, Americans forgot about them, and this came out and failed to chart and sold 30,000 copies between 1967 and now, because it's every bit as good as that. And I love the Beatles, and they're my favorite band. But Ray Davies was by this point actually up, several albums before this point, he was the equal of the best songwriter out there, save Lennon and McCartney, and I would place him above Jagger, Richards, Townsend, Dylan, and anybody else. So if you don't have this, go out and buy it as soon as you finish watching this video. You will thank me for it. Hope you all have a good weekend, and we will see you next time with another Kinks album. And I haven't bought any records lately, so I'm kind of saving money, but so nothing new to show. Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you.